You could just use your invisible fences as you do your regular fences, or you could get a little more creative with it. Hello everyone, thanks for checking out this video. Obviously this video is only going to be helpful for those who have the Dominion DLC for Jurassic World Evolution 2, or who are considering getting it, or if you are just here for my sparkling personality. Let's address the elephant in the room. The invisible fences aren't actually invisible. Clearly. They are just less obtrusive. I personally really like how they look, but I noticed in my comment sections that not everyone is a fan, and they would have preferred for them to be actually invisible. To make them even less obtrusive, like the least obtrusive, almost invisible you might actually say, is to just put them in water. The fences work perfectly fine in water because they don't actually function any differently from a regular barrier in the game. The game does not take into account any new technology for these fences to be able to work. So a really easy way to make the fences as close to invisible as possible is just to make a narrow moat around an enclosure and lay the fence down in the water. This creates a really natural look. It's a no-brainer, but when I shared this on Twitter, it really caught on and I was like, okay, maybe I should just do a video with tips like this. And that's how we ended up here. In a previous video, I already showed you that you don't technically even need fences to enclose your dinosaurs. Planters and decorations work just fine. Technically. Obviously, it doesn't look too realistic that a dinosaur doesn't just charge over the planters towards our juicy guests. And that was definitely a recurring comment on that video. So for realism, you can combine that no fences idea with the invisible fences. This is also another trick to change up the look of the invisible fence if you don't particularly like it. You can obscure it with the decorations quite a bit. I think the combination of these two works very well. Another combination I really like is pairing the invisible fence with concrete fences. In the first Jurassic World Evolution, we had plain and electrified concrete fences. For some reason, they didn't bring the electrified concrete fence into Jurassic World Evolution 2, which left me with a bit of a conundrum. As you might have seen on the channel, I love building high security facilities for dangerous dinosaur species and pretending that these extreme measures are necessary to contain them. I know you can switch off escapes, guys, come on now. Well, for these high security enclosures, I think the concrete fencing just looks the best. It looks strong. But I oftentimes combine them with an extra layer of electric fences as well for extra security. I think it's really cool to line the inside of the concrete enclosure with the invisible fence to prevent the dinosaur from even getting close to the non-electrified concrete barrier. For example, say you are housing a dinosaur that could climb a non-electrified fence, both logically and practically in the game, like for example the Scorpius Rex, but you do want the beefy look of the concrete fence as opposed to an electrified wire fence. I think putting the invisible fence in front of the concrete fence just works very well for realism. On the flip side, let's say you like using the electrified wire fences. Realistically speaking, it's a bit cruel that the animals get the full shock of 10,000 volts as soon as they touch that fence. It is even referenced in Jurassic World Dominion that those electrified fences were kinda cruel, but they were proven to be necessary. Lining the electrified fence with an invisible fence on the inside could function as protection for the animals. You could pretend that the invisible fence only gives them a light zap to warn them and to keep them away from the powerful fence that is going to give them a huge shock. Not just from an animal-loving perspective, but obviously also from the perspective that these are very valuable assets, as Claire Deering liked to say in the past, and you wouldn't want them to harm themselves. Personally, I think this makes a lot of sense if you're building a more animal-friendly kind of park, while also wanting to meet the realism standards of, yeah, just in case we should put the raptors behind a fence with 10,000 volts on it, but we don't actually want them to hurt themselves. Let me know in a comment down below which double fence combo you prefer. Decorations with invisible fence, concrete with invisible fence, or electrified fence with invisible fence. And by the way, if you are enjoying the tips and you're scrolling down to comment anyway, leave a like on the video and of course subscribe for more. Another idea I'm taking and adapting from my high security builds is lining the viewing galleries with fences. The viewing galleries just have big panes of glass and there's only really just a bar or a couple of bars out in front to deter animals from getting to the glass. But Dominion has shown us that a bit of a steel bumper and some glass isn't exactly going to stop our big and hungry dinosaurs. So I like putting at least a light steel fence in front of the galleries normally for these high security realism builds. Obviously though, the whole point of a viewing gallery is to give an unobstructed view into the paddock, and putting a fence in front of that sort of negates the purpose. Well, for my Giga enclosure build, I used invisible fences in front of the viewing galleries, and I think that works perfectly. It keeps the view open, but realistically it is a deterrent to keep the animals a good distance away from the glass and to prevent expensive lawsuits. Of course, you can apply the first tip here as well. Put water in front of the viewing gallery and hide the invisible fence in the water. If you've seen my better Biosyn Sanctuary build, then you'll recognize that this tip comes right out of that project, and it is to line the tour tracks with invisible fencing. Again, this is for that touch of realism, so you can get your tours close to a Therizinosaurus without having to worry about the claw picking up your guests right out of the truck. Damn, I wish that was an actual animation. It's not the easiest thing to do. It requires a fair amount of patience because the fence wants to snap onto the tour track to create a gate. Make it a little easier on yourself by making long stretches of the tour track perfectly straight. The more curves you have, the harder it is to place the fencing around it because you have to match that curve. Do not place the fencing first and then try to snake the tour through. That does not work, like, at all. Obviously, lining the tour track with fencing naturally separates an area into different enclosures, so that is something to keep in mind while you're laying down the tour track. Lay down the tour track as if you were laying down fences between exhibits, so you know you leave areas on either side big enough to function as an exhibit in and of themselves, because dinosaurs will not be able to cross over the tour track. If you want to see more of this process and the end result, check out the 2 videos on the channel about the Better Biosyn Dinosaur Sanctuary. A really fun park attraction from Jurassic World that we unfortunately never saw implemented in our game is a petting zoo. Using mods, I was able to make a petting zoo in the first game, and if you've been using mods for Jurassic World Evolution 2 as well, a petting zoo has been possible for some time. At least, if you use your imagination, of course. Well, now with the DLC, it's possible for everyone to make a pretty convincing looking petting zoo. You just have to pretend that if a dinosaur tries to cross the invisible fence, it feels a vibration, like a warning, and the animals in the petting zoo are docile enough for that to discourage them from crossing the fence and escaping. Meanwhile, our guests are able to reach over the fence without issue to touch and hand feed the animals. You have to do some creative gymnastics in your head to make it work, but I do think it works. And I've always said that you do need to use your imagination if you really want to get the most out of this game. Building a petting zoo then becomes really easy. Just have an enclosure with path coming through and line the path with invisible fencing. You can have one path go in and back so it remains one complete enclosure where the dinosaurs can move around freely, or you can use the path and the fence to split the area into multiple smaller enclosures and separate certain species from each other. Because even animals that are docile towards humans can't always necessarily cohabitate with each other. Some of my favorite species for the petting zoo are obviously Hominocephaly, Minmi, Dracorex, and Struthiomimus. Let me know in a comment down below which species you would put in your own petting zoos. Those are some of my tips for invisible fences. I've only had the DLC for a week at this point, so maybe I'll get even more ideas the longer I play around with them, so stay tuned for that. I always put out videos with park building tips and inspiration. Check out the channel to see what I've done in the past, and subscribe to see what I will do in the future. Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and until next time, enjoy the game.